We are here for going live, and Instagram is going. My name is Susie Hately, and I am delighted to be here talking to you a little bit about migraines and reducing the symptoms associated with migraines. And so I've got Instagram TV here, and I've got Facebook here. So I'm going to kind of move between each camera so that I can address both of you. And then if there's any comments or questions that come up for either side, then I can actually address them. So we're talking about migraines here. I've worked a lot with people with migraines, lots of people with headaches. I get referrals often from the headache clinics here in Calgary because a lot of what I do works really, really well. And the big key here when I'm talking about migraines is I utilize this concept right here. And this is my traffic light concept. And so when people come in to see me, they come in to see me because they've got red light symptoms. So in this case, they've got migraines, and the migraines are at a place where they are not interested in tolerating them anymore. They want to do something about them. So they're at red light, and they are annoying, and they are getting in the way of them living their lives. My job then is to help them understand what the yellow lights are. And the yellow lights are the whispers that let us know that something is about to come around the corner to let us know that the migraine is going to come. And so when I can help them understand what those whispers are, then they can intervene at a whisper level so that they don't actually have to experience the red, right? And so then as we can continue to work together, they then start to understand the yellow to green. And so then they start to oscillate more of their life in between yellow and green. But with this particular IGTV and Facebook Live, I want to talk more about the red to yellow, because this really is the fundamental piece. If you're in a position where you've got migraines, you got big time headaches, or anything of that nature, and you are done tolerating it, then what we get to explore is this idea of how to listen to the whispers so that you don't have to hear the screams, right? How do you pay attention to the yellow lights? And so the process that I tend to go through is this, is we move through a series of movements and we begin to recognize where you're moving well and where you're compensating. When you can become aware of that, for many people, they then start to recognize the relationship between how they move and what goes on in through their head. Now, for some people, there's a very strong correlation between the tension they hold in their body and their migraine. Not everybody, but for many people, there is a correlation between the two. So when they're able to pick up on a yellow light being, say, shoulder tension or held breath or other gripping patterns in their body, then they can intervene at that level, make a shift, and then they don't necessarily experience the migraine in the same way. A woman that I've recently worked with, she also had auras associated with her migraines, and she was able to take this level of awareness, this way of paying attention, and she was able to take it off the mat. And she was able to start to recognize when things like she wasn't drinking enough water or when she didn't get enough sleep at night, that this often triggered an aura, which then was the trigger for the migraine. Now, what became really cool about this is she was able to then recognize the yellow light before the aura. She was able to recognize the whisper before the aura started to come, because when she got the aura, typically it meant the migraine was really, really quick in coming. So when she was able to recognize that, then she was able to recognize the other things and then intervene. So it got to the point where she was someone who had migraines 3 or 4 times a week, and she was able to reduce them to once a week, and then she was able to reduce them to once a month. And when they did come, they came as a result of just an increasing amount of stress load or an increase in just amount of stuff going on in life. And she either just didn't have the bandwidth or she just had to do something she had to push through in order to get something done. Now, here's what's really interesting. A lot of times when people have migraines, as well as any other condition, but because we're talking about migraines, we'll stick with migraines, is when people have the symptom of migraines, it can sometimes be like, oh God, you know, like there's an annoyance at the symptom. And what ends up starting to happen is that people begin to recognize the symptoms are actually trying to get their attention, even the migraine itself. So someone that I'm currently working with, she was actually saying to me, you know, she recognized that when a migraine came in, there was a correlation to a thought pattern that she didn't want to pay attention to. So when she wanted to avoid something, there was a correlation to a migraine being present. So then she started to pay attention to that correlation, right? And so when the migraine started to come up, she's able to kind of pay attention to, okay, what is it that I don't want to pay attention to? And maybe I need to deal with something around that. So it becomes really interesting. And what I want you to get, if you're someone who experiences migraines, this might not be your process, right? Like that might be not your signal. It's the act of paying attention to what else is going on in your world that then it provides an indication, right? So often I find is that there's all this talk about how to manage migraines and what migraines are and all of that. And what ends up occurring is that we almost rely too much on our intellect, and we don't pay as much attention to the somatic kinesthetic experience. And so it's almost like the intellect overrides the kinesthetic experience. And we really do need to pay attention to that kinesthetic, somatic, intuitive sense of ourself. And so we utilize the evidence or the intellect or the research that's out there, and we can use it to support our intuition, can support our kinesthetic awareness. Because ultimately, here's the thing, is there are a ton of different things that you can do to support yourself with your migraines. There's a ton of things you can do to help reduce the symptoms associated with your migraines. But how do you determine which works for you? You can read research paper or a book or study or talk to friends or whatever, and you can try all those things that they've done, but you need to pay attention to what actually works for you. And how you pay attention to that is you maybe try something out and notice if the stimulus has a positive response, and then if it has a positive response, you then use that as more data, right? So you want to make sure that your intellect is supporting that kinesthetic experience, not your intellect hammering away on that kinesthetic experience. So when you start to pay attention to these yellow lights, when you start to pay attention to the symptoms that are really trying to be a communication mechanism to you, when you pay attention to that, then you gain a really rich amount of information about how to serve yourself, right? And how to make forward gains. So again, let me say this one more time. When people come in to see me or when you have the migraine, you're in red, right? And so what do you notice that's correlated to the red coming on? And so when people come to see me, we start with just basic movement patterns. I teach them how to pay attention in a certain specific way about how they move, how they grip, where they brace, where they compensate, what other movement patterns are being involved that don't need to be involved. So then they recognize a sort of a purity of motion and where things are working and where things aren't working, and then quieting the thing that aren't working and nurturing the thing that, is working. And then by utilizing that framework, they can take that off the mat and recognize where else things are working and where else things aren't working, and then nurture the thing that is working and quiet the thing that isn't working, right? And so they can take that very simple formula and start to apply it. So my hairdresser, actually, she discovered, and through her process, she's been having migraines since she's about 6 years old. And then somewhere, I believe it was in her 30s, she realized that eggs are a huge trigger for her migraines. And I can't remember how she figured that out. But the thing is that she figured that out. And she may have done an elimination diet and then brought things back. But the idea is that's a really great method for determining yellow lights associated through diet and migraines, right? And so she did an elimination diet, perhaps, if that's what her process was. And then as she started to introduce, then noticed a trigger. I think that's how it went. But the point is that she figured out that eggs have an impact. And so she needs to be really careful. Like, she can't have anything that has eggs in it, like no baking, no nothing. It's not just having an egg in a pan. It's like egg in anything, and it will trigger a migraine. So that's an indicator that she knows will lead off, right? And so the key is she hasn't had a migraine in a long time, right? So this is what we're trying to do. If you're I want you to get that even though you may have had migraines for many, many, many moons, that it doesn't have to be consistently a process you have to experience. And this is one way that can help bring your awareness and your attention to the process, maybe in a different way than you're used to, right? And so then when you start paying attention to those whispers, like I said, you won't have to actually hear the screams. And as you go through the process, you might hit up against some oops and you'll miss something. something's under your level of awareness, you know, and that's what happens. But it's the process of uncovering what's under your level of awareness and what's contributing to this big thing called a migraine. Because my biggest aha in all of my years of teaching people how to get out of pain and how to manage headaches and how to manage many different processes is that the pain is not where the problem is, right? The pain, obviously, we need to work with the migraine, but it's actually not the actual issue. It's an expression of an issue, and an issue is under the level of awareness. And so as you can help bring attention in a new way to the ways that you're moving, maybe the ways that you're eating, maybe the ways that you're managing stress, maybe the ways that you're doing other things in your life, you'll notice contributory factors. I think the other key to keep in mind here is this. You have a genetic trigger, perhaps, or a DNA trigger, or chromosomal trigger that says that you are someone who gets migraines. And so what I'm saying is, I'm not saying this is a cure at all. What I'm saying is it's there. You can offset the flare. You can offset the amount quite dramatically by paying attention to the indicators, those yellow lights. And then as you became more and more clear of those, then you can make a big change. Now, I'm going to give you an exercise for you to play with. So an exercise that might be helpful for you, and this might be, it might sound kind of funny, is I want you to imagine that you have nostrils all over your head. Yes, I said nostrils. I want you to imagine you've got nostrils all over your head. And so you know how when you breathe, you're breathing through your nose, and the whole respiratory system does the breathing thing, and then you exhale. I want you to pretend that you no longer breathe through your nose. Just pretend, and just pretend you breathe through your head. And I want you to imagine you can inhale and exhale through your head. I had a client recently, and she's like, I imagined like 5 gazillion nostrils around my head and my migraine went away. But the idea here is I want you just to think about this idea of breathing in and around your head. And for some of you, this will be a really big insight and aha in terms of enabling breath and relaxation to support and shift some of the symptoms you're experiencing, maybe down through your neck, maybe through your shoulders. And then if it does give you some level of relief, then what I want you to pay attention to is if you feel the symptoms start to creep back up, notice what other biomechanical patterns, notice what other scenarios are present that are contributing to those factors. And when you can pay attention in that way and notice what those other contributing factors are, then you can start to make little baby steps toward not having those migraines as commonly as you currently do. Okay? So if there are questions about that, if you would like some help in working with your migraines, then I do offer private sessions. I also offer a six-day therapeutic yoga intensive where you can explore movement patterns and uncover yellow lights of all sorts that can help you with managing your migraines. If you're interested, then you can just direct message me and we can go from there. Okay? So I hope this has been helpful. Please, again, ask me any questions, or if you're interested in more, you can send me a message. All right? Take care and have a great time exploring your body and becoming attentive and aware in a whole new way. Thank you. Take care. We'll see you next time.